All right, so today we're diving into the life of Pablo Escobar, a name everyone knows, but was he a visionary or just a master manipulator? Was he grifter or gifted?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
And we've got some interesting sources today to help us figure that out.
We do.
We're going to be looking at an article about Medellín's transformation from 99% invisible.
Oh, okay.
Also, Escobar's biography, as told by Wikipedia and the BBC.
Interesting.
And we even have an article about cocaine hippos from The Sun.
Cocaine hippos? That's a new one for me.
Yeah, I know, right? It's wild.
Yes.
It's a story full of contradictions, too.
Yeah.
Like in the 1980s, Medellin was considered the most dangerous city in the world because of the violence from Escobar's cartel and the drug trade.
Right. Now, though, Medellin is seen as a model city. It has a lower homicide rate than a lot of U.S. cities.
Yeah, I know. And 99% Invisible pointed out that investments in public transportation were a big part of that turnaround. So it's a huge change.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, what role did Escobar play in all of this? Well, both the bad stuff, but also maybe some good outcomes, too.
Yeah, that's the key question. To understand all of that, though, we need to go back to Escobar's beginnings.
So let's rewind. Both Wikipedia and the BBC describe Escobar as being born into poverty in rural Colombia. He was involved in illegal things pretty much from a young age, started with petty theft and grave robbing. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Then he moved on to car theft and smuggling before finding his place in the cocaine trade.
And it's incredible how fast his ambition and ruthlessness took him to the top. He wasn't content with small-time stuff. He wanted to build a whole empire, and he did. The Medellin cartel under his leadership controlled so many smuggling routes, pumping cocaine into the U.S. and beyond.
So that sounds like some classic visionary traits, right?
Yeah.
Ambition, drive, a knack for innovation. But was it all just a cover for greed?
That's the thing. It gets even more complicated when you consider how Escobar maintained control. His philosophy was plata o plomo, which means silver or lead.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Basically, it was take a bribe or face death. Brutal but effective. He silenced anyone who opposed him, created so much fear.
But at the same time, he was cultivating that Robin Hood image. Funding social programs, building houses for the poor, soccer fields. Was that genuine? Or was that calculated to control how people saw him?
It's the question that people still debate today. Did he really care about improving lives, or was it a strategic move to gain support and protection from law enforcement? His actions were this crazy mix of generosity and ruthlessness.
It's hard to figure out his true intentions.
Yeah.
Okay, so get this. Escobar's estate, Hacienda Nipoles, wasn't your average mansion.
Oh, I've heard about this place.
It was insane. A private zoo with hippos, giraffes, elephants,
Oh,
even a bull ring, and a replica dinosaur skeleton.
no way.
And a whole theme park. Like, it
Yeah.
was excessive beyond belief.
Wow, so Hacienda Nipoles became a symbol of his power then, like a physical display of just how wealthy he was.
Exactly. It showed his extravagance. But here's the crazy part. Today, Hacienda Nipoles has been transformed into a theme park. Like, it attracts over 500,000 visitors a year.
Really?
Yeah, so people are flocking to the former playground of a notorious drug lord.
It makes you think, is it okay to profit from Escobar's legacy like that? Turning his crazy mansion into a family-friendly tourist spot? Are we kind of sanitizing his violent past by doing that?
Yeah, it really does. And, talking about blurred lines,
Yeah.
there's another crazy consequence of Escobar's lifestyle that we need to talk about. The cocaine hippos.
Oh, yeah, the hippos.
Um,
After Escobar died, they just kind of abandoned all the animals from his zoo.
Yeah.
And with no natural predators, they've done really well.
Right.
But now there are so many of them. They're
Yeah.
considered an invasive species in Colombia.
So it's like a living, breathing reminder of the unintended consequences of Escobar's actions.
You could definitely say that. And now the Colombian government is trying to figure out how to manage this. Like, do they sterilize them?
Yeah.
Could they even cull the animals?
Wow.
It's a tricky situation for sure.
Yeah, and The Sun even reported on this crazy incident where one of these cocaine hippos was charging across a road.
Oh, wow.
Like, it was caught on camera.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary, whether they become dangerous to people.
Oh, absolutely. But the hippos are just one part of a much bigger story. I think to really understand Escobar's legacy, we have to remember the human cost of his actions. The violence and corruption he caused really left a mark on Colombia.
Yeah, you're right. We can't forget about the victims. The BBC actually interviewed some of the families of Escobar's victims.
Yeah.
And their stories are just so powerful. You really see the pain he caused.
It's heartbreaking. One family member was placing flowers on the grave of a loved one killed by Escobar's cartel, and they just said, I just asked for forgiveness. It really highlights that beyond the headlines and the Robin Hood myth, there were real people hurting.
And that pain probably continues today, right? I mean,
Right.
the psychological toll, the
Right.
loss of trust in institutions.
Exactly. It goes way beyond the immediate victims.
And it makes you wonder, how did someone like Escobar get so powerful in the first place? Was it the institutions failing? Or maybe deep social and economic problems that allowed this to happen?
That's a good question. I mean, Escobar cultivated this whole image of being an outlaw, an anti-hero. And he had a certain charisma that appealed to people, especially those who felt ignored by the government.
He knew how to play the game, didn't he?
Oh, he was a master manipulator for sure. He used his wealth and influence to create a narrative that really resonated with the poor and marginalized. He made himself out to be a champion of the people while doing all these horrible things.
It makes it really difficult to separate the good he did, building schools and funding programs, from the bad.
Mhm.
It all gets mixed up.
It does. It's easy to get caught up in the Robin Hood story,
Right.
see him as a good guy even though he was a criminal.
Yeah.
But we have to look at the bigger picture. What were his real motivations?
Did he actually care about social justice? Or were those acts of generosity just a way to build his power?
It's really hard to know for sure.
Yeah.
These are questions people are still debating today. And actually, there is a neighborhood in Medellín that was founded by Escobar himself.
What? A whole neighborhood named after Pablo Escobar.
It's called Barrio Pablo Escobar. And get this many residents there still see him in a positive light.
Really?
They see him as a provider, someone who helped them when the government didn't.
So even decades after his death, Escobar's legacy is still so complicated. He's both admired and condemned.
That's exactly it. It shows how complex he was, all the contradictions.
Right.
It makes him so interesting but also hard to define. And it proves that his story still has power. Even today, people are fascinated by Escobar.
Yeah, from books and documentaries to TV shows like Narcos, there's definitely a fascination with his life.
It's that whole rise and fall of a powerful figure, the allure of the criminal world,
Right.
the moral ambiguity. It draws people in, and Escobar's story has it all.
But with that fascination comes responsibility. Like, we can't glorify the violence and the criminal stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It's so important to be critical, to remember the victims and understand the context of his actions.
And part of that context is acknowledging his political ambitions. He was elected to the Colombian Congress in 1982. It's pretty amazing for someone with his background.
It is. And it makes you wonder, was he really trying to change the system from within? Or was it just another way to grab more power?
It could have been both, right?
Yeah,
Knowing Escobar, he always blurred those lines.
he did. That's what makes him so compelling, even after all these years. He's hard to categorize, makes us think about power and corruption,
Yeah.
and the power of charisma.
So before we finish this part of our deep dive into Pablo Escobar's life, that really stood out to you from today's conversation, for me, it's that Barrio Pablo Escobar neighborhood. It just blows my mind that people still have good things to say about him after all the awful things he did.
It really shows how complex his legacy is, how deeply connected he is to Medellín's history. Some people see him as this folk hero, someone who protected them and provided when no one else would.
It seems like those conflicting views are everywhere when you look at his life, like his time in Congress. He actually managed to get elected, but like you said, it wasn't smooth sailing at all.
No, not at all. His time in politics was short and full of controversy. His presence in Congress really shook things up. The established politicians saw him as a dangerous outsider, and his methods were definitely not diplomatic.
So what was he really going for? Reform, power,
Hmm.
or both?
Tough to say for sure. Some people believe that Escobar genuinely wanted to use his position to help the poor and fix social problems. I mean, he did fund a bunch of social programs and infrastructure projects, but others think his political ambitions were just a way to gain power and avoid prosecution.
It's true, he did build schools and housing and even hospitals. Those aren't things a typical selfish criminal would do.
Right, and that's what makes Escobar so puzzling. He had this weird duality, this mix of real generosity and brutal ruthlessness. It's like he was constantly fighting this battle within himself, between good and evil, altruism and greed.
And that battle played out in politics, too. Things got really violent during his time in Congress, didn't they?
Yeah, the violence definitely escalated when he was in office. He was clashing with the government and rival cartels, and the body count kept rising.
Weren't there even rumors that he threatened to kill the entire Supreme Court?
There are stories about that, yeah. Though it's hard to know for sure what really happened. But whether that specific threat was real or not, it shows the kind of fear he created. Escobar used intimidation as a weapon. He wasn't afraid to go to extremes to shut people up or eliminate anyone he saw as a threat.
So in a world where charm and controversy go hand in hand, how do we tell a real visionary from a skilled con artist? How can we know if someone's really trying to make a difference or just looking out for themselves?
That is the big question, isn't it? I think it comes down to their motives and the impact they have. True visionaries are driven by this genuine desire to improve the world, to leave behind a positive, lasting legacy. Even if their actions are messy or unconventional, they're ultimately trying to do good, to create something that helps others.
While a con artist, even a charming one who does some good deeds, is ultimately motivated by self-interest, their main goal is to gain power and wealth no matter who gets hurt along the way.
Exactly. And you can really judge a person's legacy by the long-term effects of their actions. Did they create real change? Or did their desire for power and money just cause more harm in the end?
And when it comes to Pablo Escobar, the answer seems to be a mix of both. He was full of contradictions, capable of great kindness and terrible violence. His legacy is still something people argue about and are fascinated by.
His story serves as a warning. It reminds us that charm and good deeds can hide bad intentions. It also makes us think about how things like poverty and inequality can contribute to the rise of people like Escobar.
So was he a visionary who strayed from his path, or a master manipulator who tricked the world? After this deep dive into his life, I don't think there's an easy answer. He was a complex person who definitely left his mark on the world. What do you think? Grifter or gifted? Let us know your thoughts on social media. We always love hearing from you.